Again, we're going to start with the controller for the API. So this is the design of the REST API URLs. And we have completed the get URL so far. The next is the post, which allows us to add a comment to the database. So for this post request, we will be sending this JSON in the request body. The comment controller will receive it as a comment entity, and it should return the created comment. So in the HTTP response, we should get this JSON and the status code 201. Notice that this JSON has the comment ID, which is generated while saving the comment in the database. So let's get started with the unit test for this requirement. We want to add a new comment, and the method should return the created comment with ID, post ID, and the comment text. The comment that we pass into the method should pass some validations. That is, it should not have an ID, but it must have the comment text in it. So I'll create a new unit test method. I'll name this add new comment, and first I'm going to test the validation of the ID. So with ID set, throws invalid parameter exception. Since we're testing an exception, I'll add the expected attribute first. Now calling the method and the test, and pass in the comment which has an ID. I'll just extract this to a local variable and then set the ID to 1. And then I have to create this method in the comment controller class. Now I'll just run the test to make sure it fails. Yes, it fails because expected exception is not thrown. So now I'm going to implement the validation in the add comment method. So now I got that test passing. Let's move on to the next validation, which is the comment text. I'll just copy this test and rename it. I can just pass in a new comment here with no values set. So I'll run the test first. It is failing due to the same reason as before. So now I'll implement the validation. Here I'll first check if the message is null and then also check if it is empty. Run the test again. Now it has passed. In the next test, I'm going to check whether it returns a comment with ID when a valid comment is passed in. So with valid comment, returns comment with ID. For this, I'm writing the assert first. For the actual, I'm going to call the method and get the ID. So I'll create a local variable for the comment because I need to set the comment message in it. I'll create a matcher with is greater than 0 to compare the ID with. Now before running the test, I have to get it to compile. The method return value should be changed from void to comment. And then I can run the test. So it's failing due to an assertion error as expected, and I'll add the implementation now. The quickest way to get this test passing is to set the ID before returning the comment. It's dodgy, I know, but I'll come back to correct this in a second. So I'll run all the tests again and make sure they all pass. Now back to the implementation. We got to do some refactoring here. It is definitely not the responsibility of the controller to set the ID. The controller should only delegate to the service after validation. So I'm going to move this to the service. So for that, I'm going to create a test in the service test class. A very similar test to the last test in controller. Pass in a valid comment and it should return the created comment with the ID. So I'll create the method in commit service to get this to compile. And then run the test. So it fails due to a null pointer exception. So I'll return the comment instead of null and run this again. Now the assertion is failing. Now I'll go back to the implementation. I'll do the same dodgy thing here just so we get the test passing. And then looking at the implementation, is it the responsibility of the service to set the ID of the comment? No, because it is auto-generated while being saved. So all we can do here is to pass this on to the repository for saving in the database. So now if I run this test again, it's failing due to a null pointer exception. That's because I'm calling getID on a null. I've set up a mock for comment repository, but it returns null when the save method is called on it. A mock has to be told what to do when each of its methods are called. So that means I have to tell comment repository mock to return a comment when the save method is called with this comment object. So now I got it passing, and the implementation is looking clean as well. Let's go back to the comment controller to fix the dodgy implementation. I'll run all the tests again to make sure they all pass before doing any modifications. So that's all good. At this point, the controller should delegate to the service. Run the test once more. So we're getting a null pointer again because the mock hasn't been set up for the new method. So I'll do that real quick. Now it's passing. On to the next test. The returned comment should have the post ID set in it. I'll just copy this test and modify the method name. And then change the actual to post ID instead of ID. Let's run the test now. So it's failing as expected. Assertion error, expected is 1 but was 0. As you can see, this is the JSON that comes in the request, which only has the comment text. So where is the post ID? How do we get hold of the post ID? Well, the post ID comes in the request URL as a path variable. So we need to add it as a parameter to the method. And then before passing the comment to the service, I'm going to set the post ID on the comment. And now I have to update the method calls in all the tests. Let's run the test. It's still failing. That's because during the test, the addComment method is returning the comment which is provided by the mock. I have set up the mock so that it returns a different comment object to the one that's passed into it. What I'm going to do now is to set up the mock to return the same comment that's passed into it by using then answer instead of then return. By the way, I have given a lot of examples in this Mockito post, so if you are new to Mockito, check it out. It covers almost everything you need to write some decent unit tests. So here I'm basically getting hold of the argument that comes to the method and returning it as it is. Okay, got it passing as well. The next one is to test the comment message. So I'll copy this test and rename it. Then I also need to change the asset as well. So I have it already passing without having to do anything in the implementation. It kind of suggests that this test is not needed, but I'll let it be for the moment. Now I also want to make sure that we validate the post ID as well, so I'll add another test for that. Expected invalid parameter exception. Let's run the test. No failing test. Well, we're missing one important condition here. The valid comment. So I'll set the commit message to make it valid. Now the test is failing. And I can add the validation to the implementation. Okay, all tests are passing now. Looking at the service test again, I want to make sure that the comment has a valid post ID before it is saved. So I'll first write a test for that. The test has failed, so now I can add the validation in the commit service. Now that test has passed, but the other one is failing due to the validation that we added just now. I should send a valid comment, so I'll set the post ID and the comment message as well. Going back to the commit controller, I think we can extract this validation bit to a separate method. Let me do that real quick and then let's run the tests again. All good. Now it's time to move on to integration testing.